to call to order the January meeting of the Hollis School Board. The first item on our agenda is agenda adjustments, nominations, resignations, retirements, and correspondence.
Yes, I would just like to ask for an agenda adjustment to add under discussion, a discussion around critical shortage related to professional staff.
Okay. Is it okay if we just insert that at the end?
Yes, that'd be fine.
Okay.
And then I'll just let you know, the board know that Gina will be joining us. She's finishing contract negotiations at the co-op.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from our December meeting.
I move to approve the minutes of the Hollis School Board meeting of December 6, 2023 with the following amendments. Page 4, line 7, delete increase, following total. Page 4, line 9, adjustment should be plural to adjustments.
Second.
Thank you.
Oh, apologies. Okay, any discussion, other changes? Okay, all in favor? Opposed?
That's it.
5-0-0, motion passes. Okay, moving on to, are there any other minutes, Tammy? No. Okay, moving on to the principal's report.
I just want to highlight a couple things. As you know, we just returned from vacation and everybody's getting back in the swing of it. It's amazing how quickly students and some staff lose their routine and need to get their structure back. A couple dates I just want to highlight. Martin Luther King Day is January 15th, so there's no school. And Election Day, the board has across the SAU decided to close schools, so there'll be no school on the 23rd. We want to thank all the teachers who hosted sing-alongs, instructed different things through the weeks before the holidays, which made it a fun and lively environment. I've always said that you can come into an elementary school before the holiday break and you can literally feel the excitement.
Buzzes.
Yeah, it's just amazing, and the kids are just so much fun to be around and have trouble getting to the holiday, and now they just have trouble adjusting back with their sleeping routines and that. The Hughes, Candy did her regular wings, honoring a number of students for their behavior, social skills, and academics. They are practicing up there for the first round of the spelling bee. They do a nice thing with the staff spelling bee just to allow the kids to see what it's like, and some staff like me would tell them that it's not the most fun and exciting piece for them to participate in, because not every child wants to step out and take that risk and represent their class. So I think it's a great learning experience, and things go well. Enrollment-wise, we are +2 in pre-K. Other than that, we're pretty much holding steady. And that's it for the principal's reports.
Andy, do you know what the acronym AHERA, under HPS, it was an inspection that was completed in November?
Yes, I can't give you what it means. It used to be our school building specs, is what I would have called it.
Okay.
So what happens is the state sends representatives down and they walk through the building with the principal and, in this case, director of facilities, and they put together a report if they see any things that are a concern for them, and Lance will be getting those reports back, and we'll do anything that we need to do for compliance. That's separate from our regular fire and safety inspections that occur through the town.
Okay.
Is it the asbestos one?
We have to provide our documentation around asbestos, but they look literally from room to room, all different issues around maintenance. It's really your school approval under the 306 is the law. There's an academic portion, which we have our curriculum base and all of those pieces, and then there's a physical building looking at size and space and things of that nature.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you.
Could you expand a little bit on the roof leaks at Hughes?
Sure. We continue to experience in some of these storms what I would call leaks that we are trying to track down.
Yeah.
They're not like glaring leaks where you can say it's in this room and it's coming right down, and they're not always consistent, because in older buildings things tend to travel down the pipes and manifest themselves someplace. It's not something that we are not well experienced in. We deal with this every year. Usually it's during the snow and thaw. This seems to be the two major storms that have really dropped buckets of rain all at one time.
Sure.
Yeah. But Ed and Lance are on that. And again, I would say it's more in the need of what I would call, in a building this size, smaller repairs than a roof replacement.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just gonna pop
Yeah,
in.
please.
Cause like, when you look at the sixth grade classrooms are actually at the lowest level and they've got water spots on the ceiling, so it's
Right.
absolutely that
Yep.
least path
Kind
of
of
resistance.
finding its way.
Yeah.
And it's not always in the same place, so that's the other piece. Like, there's been a storm where you might have come into the front lobby and there were some barrels right there. And then the next storm, there was nothing. So, we regularly deal with the roofing company, so they're well-versed in our roofs, and I think we'll get to the bottom of it
So
eventually.
it's intermittent leakage.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
and I'm just wondering about any secondary damage to the structure or anything like that, or anything that we
My
need.
concern would be mold. If
Yeah.
it's in the
Yeah,
sixth grade.
particularly on the bottom floor, because we know that that level is sensitive to moisture and can result in substantial mold problems.
Correct. You know, as part of Lance's job, he's constantly managing the buildings. So, from a structural point, I don't have any concerns because it's not a constant, it's not what I'll call repetitive wear and tear.
Okay,
From a mold piece, you always worry about that.
yeah.
But at the same time, it's not a consistent spot, it dries out and it's gone. And we are, continue to train our custodians in how to deal with all facets of their job.
I'm delighted to see Air Handler 3 is almost in service. or
Yep.
Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's been a long road.
Are we gonna have like a ribbon cutting when it actually gets turned on? Can we do that?
We could absolutely do that.
No, it's been on, it's just not been optimized.
Right, exactly.
I'm joking.
No,
I'm
it
not.
would have
Let's
been
not
nice, but the
ribbing.
point is, I just, for the public's sake, it's been cold enough to need heat. It's been running, it just hasn't been optimized through the building management system. So we're completing that.
Anything else on the principal's report? Questions, comments?
Are we covering, I didn't see it, are we covering enrollment?
Yes, under a discussion.
We are, okay, thank you.
Well, it's the enrollment committee. Did you have specific questions on
Well,
the
I
schedule?
know we continue on grade 1, I believe, we're pretty topped out.
Right.
Do we have a strategy?
Well, we actually have budgeted for a teacher next year.
Okay,
But when we hit that cap this year, the recommendation from the building was to just integrate the students into the existing teachers because the pool of professionals applying was not where we had hoped.
okay.
So it was an intentional piece by us, and I think it's worked out very well because of the staff and their efforts. But at the same time, we are having sixth grades at grade 2, which we will probably continue next year because I do expect that number to go up.
Do you feel confident we're delivering education at a good experience, even though
Yeah.
we're topped out in that grade?
I do, because Paula has really utilized the paraprofessionals well. So we're doing what I'll call the group work, and those times, there's a lot of times where there's 2 adults present in the classroom.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We are running a little bit ahead of schedule. I'm going to open it for public input. At this time, I'm not seeing anyone in attendance, but if anyone joins us, we will entertain what they have to say. Okay, next items, moving on to the discussion, the annual meeting calendar.
In your board packet, the business office had once again provided you the annual meeting calendar, just to kind of get these dates on people's radar. The biggest one coming up for us right now is the public hearing date, which is February 6th. Amy brought to my attention, we'll get it corrected, when you click on that on the web, it takes you to a location of the middle school, when that's actually a function of the budget committee, it will be at town hall.
To clarify, it's on the Hollis Town website. I didn't check it on our
Oh, okay.
SAU site.
All right.
So I will double check that for
The
you.
SU site does say Monument Square Town Hall.
Okay, so it's just the Hollis Town
Okay.
website that has it incorrect. Yeah.
I will email the administrator, because
Perfect, thank you.
We'll list this on our calendar. I can check out the
Yeah.
places too.
Typically, we start that meeting at 5:30, and we take positions on the articles because the Budget Committee wants to know the position of the school board before they proceed forward. Then what we go through is the actual budget presentation by the Budget Committee, and any public input that comes in. Then they will reopen up the articles. They will take their position, and if we heard something that night from the public or a concern or something, we can absolutely alter our position. It's just to expedite the piece for the Budget Committee, because it's actually their budget that we are moving forward. That also typically serves as our February meeting, okay? I don't think there's anything pressing that we would need to add, but in the past, if an item has come up, we've covered that between 5:30 and 6, or waited till the public hearing is over and then addressed an article or something that may come up for us. So we can do that. In terms of our school district meeting day, that will be on the 14th, with a snow date of the 15th, and that will be held at Hollis Brookline Middle School. So we'll check all our dates on the calendar. The other dates are there more for posting requirements for the business office and legal pieces. Are there any questions on the calendar?
I was going to suggest that anything you send to families through the SAU would highlight the fact that it's at the middle school. Because as you
Okay.
pointed out last month,
Change from the past
it's a
couple of
change in the
years.
past
Yep.
couple of years.
We can do that.
And is that correct, that it's scheduled for a Thursday with a snow date of the Friday night? That is accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah, the problem when you have the multi-district SAU is trying to get all the required dates in. So we run into usually somebody's snow date being on a Friday.
Yeah, snow. It's gonna be
Yeah,
fine.
we're not gonna have snow.
There's no snow.
Oh,
The
that's
other,
good news.
yep, the other piece was, if you were a parent, you probably received it, but I know not all board members are parents. We did send out a superintendent newsletter, kind of talking about SB2, talking about annual meeting, and providing the dates to try to get that on people's calendar. And we'll try to do some more reminders too, as we hope to increase attendance at the meeting.
Yeah. On that note, I have been in touch with the rec director of Hollis, and there are no conflicts with any of the spring sports on either of those dates. And I wondered about putting together a flyer with some information that we could potentially share with other community organizations and ask them to help kind of
Shuttle.
spread the word. I also was wondering if one of us should consider attending a PTA meeting. I don't know the schedule of the PTA meetings, if we missed well, I guess we didn't miss the January one, but
It was yesterday.
if one of us could attend the January or February PTA meeting.
I generally do.
You do, okay, so maybe we can talk about that. And also, I know we had babysitting, we offered babysitting last year. I don't know if that's an option for us to
Yeah, we
offer
just have to coordinate with the high
this
school.
year. If you want to put me in touch with the person, I'm happy to coordinate. That'd be great. And if you guys have any other strategies on how we can help drive attendance, keep us posted. Think about it. We've got some time. Okay. Moving on to the 2024 Hollis School District warrant.
In your board packet, Kelly provided you with what I will refer to as a draft copy for your review. It gives the dates, Thursday, March 14th at 7 PM. And then the voting for people running for school board would be Tuesday, March 12th at the Lawrence Barn. And that voting is from 7 to 7. The articles, the first one is a cost article. It's the Support Staff Association. This is for 24-25 with an estimated increase of $87,179. And we'll go through these multiple times between now and people actually attending annual meeting, because we'll do it again at the budget hearing, we'll do it again at our next meeting, which will occur before the 14th. The Article 2 is the SAU budget, with the Hollis portion being $734,279, if the voters approve the recommended budget. or the adjusted budget would be $727,813 if they approved the adjusted budget. Article 3 is what I refer to as the rent article. It's the Maintenance Expendable Trust Fund for the SAU. But each year, Hollis, Brookline, and the co-op pay rent for that building. The rent total is $23,970, and historically, that gets approved to be put into the Maintenance Expendable Trust to address any issues that might come up at the SAU building itself. Article 4 is for $125,000. That is the School Building Expendable Trust. Those items that will be used to purchase or fix or replace are listed in the new items of the budget, and has been the standing means of operation for a number of years with the Budget Committee for any item that needed to be fixed. Examples of that would be new flooring, ceiling tile replacement, things of that nature. Small portions of roof often go into the maintenance trust. So those are the type of things that are there. We have $25,000 for the Special Education Expendable Trust Fund. That would go into the existing trust, and that money is there in case of an unexpected expense that should come up related to special education that couldn't be planned on. The easiest example of that would be a summer move-in for a student who needs services that we wouldn't have budgeted. As always, we would try to go through our operating budget first, followed by potentially the contingency or the special ed trust fund. And all of those, except for the operating budgets, take approval from the school board. So we can't spend the special ed trust or the contingency without coming here. And we've always made the commitment to the budget committee that we would give them notification and if needed, a discussion before we did it on that end as well. Article 6 is the contingency fund that we have had for a number of years. It basically is put in to cover an unanticipated need for a teacher, which we have had occur, but fortunately have been able to absorb those through the operating budget. But if we were hit the perfect storm and have special ed costs and need a teacher and two other things come up, this gives us that wiggle room to always make sure that we can stay within ed specs, because that $95,000 pretty much is a master level teacher's fully loaded. Article 7 is actually the operating budget, which is $16,464,092, $16,464,092. That is under guidance and meets the expectation of the Budget Committee. And I want to compliment Kelly and Donna and everybody else who participated in the process to get us to that budget. And then Article 8 is any business that may come before us that needs to be addressed. We have a new moderator in Liz Brown. This will be Liz's first year. So we're working with her. And Drew Mason is assisting her as well. So we feel very confident that we have two outstanding people to bring forth the articles.
I'd like to point out that in my 10 years of service, the contingency fund has always been $95,000.
Yeah.
And I believe it was that before I joined the board.
Yeah.
And so that dollar amount is a shrinking absolute value.
I would agree with that. You know, we're at budgeting at Masters Step 7, which if we hired Masters beyond that, we would probably be right up to that category, you know, for the full
When
fund.
we typically see the enrollment bubble at the lower grades, right? So that could be built into the narrative, the importance of this contingency fund, because if there is an enrollment change or increase, it's likely to be in the lower grades that we see.
Yeah.
And we've often had to hire teachers to address that. So.
Right. And I think the piece is, for a number of years, we've been able to get away with what I'll say moving a teacher around because the ed specs
Right.
change at fourth grade.
Yeah.
I think our numbers are going to grow that when we have to now increase the teaching staff at Hughes, that's when we're going to start to see our budget go up from a salary point of view. You know. So those will be our warrants. vetted through the budget committee and available to the public so we can start to get feedback. If anybody notices anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or Gina or Kelly, and we'll make sure that it's correct.
I'm surprised to see that we only have 7 articles this year.
I know.
It's a nice, it's a mini warrant.
Well, Brookline has 5.
Wow.
So, yeah,
We should
Our
be able to
turn
get
after
through
all
this
these
in
years.
20 minutes.
that's.
Stop talking.
uh,
All right, guys, it's Rob's fault.
It's okay with the chair, I'll turn it over to Donna to go through the
Yes,
revenue and
please.
expense report, unless there's
Please.
any other
No.
questions.
Please do.
Go ahead, Donna.
Okay, we have a revenue expense report from 12/21 of 2023 in our packet, with our year-to-date expenses and our future encumbered expenses for the year. We're currently showing a budget underrun of $535,081. We are still encumbering for unfilled positions, which also creates a savings in the benefits right now, but it is offset by the deficit in the special ed for the contracted services and staffing that we have to pay for. We recently had a savings in transportation because student transportation redid their bus routes, and we got about $33,000 of savings there.
Nice.
We have not touched the 95K contingency fund, but we are a little under in that school board SAU assessment column because back in October, you voted to increase the treasurer salary. So that wasn't budgeted for at the time, but in the end, I think we'll be fine there because we also have everything encumbered for the annual meeting and school board expenses, and we probably won't spend all of it, so. The current projected revenue is $17,231,960. We're currently seeing a fund balance at this time of $542,214. And then if we fund the trusts, which we anticipate for FY '25 of the $125,000, the $23,970, $25,000 for the special ed trust fund. And then if we fund the retained fund balance of $284,000, which is the same amount that the board approved in FY '24, we'd be left with a projected fund balance of $84,244. That would go back to the taxpayers. So we're in pretty good shape right now.
And as we say every time at this time of year, this number doesn't get finalized really till August.
Right.
So every month,
It
as
changes.
reality
Mhm.
drops its receipts, this number changes.
Yep.
And I would just,
I like that expression, reality drops its receipts.
I'd just like the board to note at the very bottom of the last page, looking ahead to the retained fund balance, the maximum that you can assign to the fund balance is $350,189. And to Tammy's point, as our contingency in that, if all of a sudden it was 2 teachers in that, having that type of balance available may be something you'd like to have. It's not a decision you need to make now, it doesn't happen until next August, so there'll even be a couple of different people sitting at the table, potentially, but I just wanted to put that out there.
Sounds good.
Anything else on the revenue and expense report? Questions? No? Okay. All right, moving on to another review of the budget.
Correct. Between, I think, last meeting and this meeting, we satisfied guidance, and we did that. We had originally talked about reducing different items by about 71,000 or asking for relief, and Kelly and I went back through and decided that we should just make the reductions and not ask for relief from guidance, because the budget committee has always been supportive of the schools and probably would have granted relief from guidance. But at the same time, with some adjustments here and there, we felt we could get it done, and we feel this budget provides us everything that we're asking for. So the operating budget from one year to the next is a 3.7% increase, $594,587. If the citizens pass all the articles, which is the HESA contract upgrade, the contingency, the SAU trust fund, the maintenance trust fund, and the special ed trust fund, and the SAU budget, that brings the entire budget up to 4.6%, or $768,685. In terms of round 4, it's usually the final round. of the budget process for us. We were able to make some adjustments, as we spoke about last meeting, to the math program, but it still allows us to take the recommendation of the teachers, because that's the price for the most expensive program. So we feel very comfortable with what we've done on our academics at both schools. One of the things that we will have a discussion about as we get to the end of the year, if Donna gives us good news that we are running at a surplus, we will again have a discussion around the virtual whiteboards, the new flat panels that we have that we had a demonstration on, because we do see those to a benefit of the teacher, and if we can accelerate those at all, we believe that is a help. But that would not be for a late spring, April, May discussion. Personnel, we see the assistance of the special ed salary for the secretary going to 220 days. We believe that will help our special ed coordinator, because that person can now do a lot of the scheduling of the meetings. We have the new teacher in there at HPS. And that really is our personnel pieces for regular ed. Under special ed, we are increasing parallels for our intensive needs program. We have a regular para for kindergarten, for pre-K at 0.5. We are showing a deduction because one of our paras is going from HPS to Hughes, so we list expenses by buildings. We have the pre-K coordinator, which we discussed at our last meeting. We felt that position was critical to, again, address the needs of the pre-K population. So that position is funded in the budget as half-time coordinator and half-time pre-K teacher for $116,374. In terms of the Hughes, we see a para, because of the number of hours that will be needed for the child, become benefits eligible. So we've allocated that. And then we have the para moving up from HPS. And then we have a need for 2 regular paras to meet student needs as we continue to grow. So special education personnel is going up by $190,055. In terms of programming, we are putting in the life skills program, which is an extension of the self-contained program from HPS. Those children are growing with us, and we are preparing the programs throughout the middle school and the high school, so they will be with us through their entire career. But that increase in the programming is $19,000. The computers, you see the regular asks for Chromebook carts. We are looking at outdoor access points for pickup patrol. As you know, we went to that, and we're very pleased with that.
So good.
But from the standpoint of the iPad, we do have some difficulties now and then, and by putting a outdoor receiver on the outside of the building, which is made for that type of weather, it will enhance that greatly. Replacement of computer equipment, we have the Chromebooks for students at HPS and the Chromebooks for students at Hughes being our 2 significant items. In terms of both buildings, we are advocating for 3 interactive flat panels. That's what we'll discuss in the spring to see if we can accelerate that and maybe purchase more out of the FY24 budget.
How many more do we need for every classroom to have one? Do you know off the top of your head?
It's a balancing act for when the teacher is ready and when the training is available.
Gotcha.
Because I don't want to put a board in the room if the individual is not ready to utilize the board.
Gotcha.
So that rollout has gone very well. I think it goes quicker once you get some in the building, because now my expert is down the hall.
Yep.
You know, which that train-the-trainer model is probably the best model, I think, for many industries. But it's very effective in schools, because I'm more likely to go back down the hall and say, Carol, I don't know what I did again, or how do I do this again, rather than
I'll help you,
yeah,
Andy.
exactly. Walking away from a training, and now I'm on my own. You know, I might have a manual, but it's been a very good model.
Gotcha.
From the shared services software, We have 2,000 allocated in each school. That cost goes across the entire SAU with each school and the SAU itself. And that's for managed services. It is further safety software to enhance our ability to resist hacking, which is becoming a constant and a more regular piece. And the biggest thing is the phishing emails. And the other piece is Google Docs shared externally to internally is also another avenue. So our IT department is doing a tremendous job, but it's, as the IT director Carol Tyler says, once we figure out the solution to stop them, they're already on to the next solution to hack again. So it's a constant battle. Safety compliance issues, I will tell you that both schools submitted proposals for safety for the state grants, and both schools were awarded $100,000 to continue our safety progress. So we are in final discussions how we'll utilize that funds, and you'll hear more about that in the coming months. Probably no work really happening until the summer because getting construction companies is very, very slow. But you may have noticed at both buildings the bollards have been installed, and those plantings will go in when we get the nice weather, and I think it'll be a very nice look as well as a new safety enhancement.
So Andy, is that why, I mean, they were zeroed out in round 3-1, but are the items that are on that safety and compliance issues section the first to be looked at for those grant dollars? Are there parameters, I guess, around the grant about what they can spend it on?
The first thing that we will look at is what I'll call reinforcing entrances, because that's really where they still wanted schools to focus. So, easiest example is the front entrance here. If you go into, Hughes, you're buzzed in one door, gets you into a foyer, and then you got to be buzzed in again. So that's the model that we'll be looking at, and how can we do that here, as well as looking at all our external doors and determining, do they need to be all glass, first of all? And there's a new type of glass that we'll be using that is, I'm going to say, bullet resistant, so it buys time, which is the biggest thing. If you go to any of the safety trainings, you're trying to get as much time as you can from the response to when the cavalry can get here. So some of those will reappear, other than those have just been delayed or will move into maintenance trust if they had to be done.
Thank you.
In the facilities maintenance, we put in, and this was part of my discussions with Ann, which we'll discuss in a little while, the enrollment committee, we put in $20,000 allocated to each building. So if we had a need for expertise, an architect or somebody to come in and consult on enrollment and maybe reconfiguring a space, we have some money to at least bring those services in. We're getting some new classroom furniture at grade 4. It's been a long time since we bought furniture, so we have that scheduled for grades 2 and 4. And then pretty much everything else is a standard item, and that gets us again to our 3.71 increase. And I do again want to thank the school board, the members of the school board that also serve on the budget committee, the business office, and all the other administrators and staff who participate in the process, because I think it's a budget that allows us again to move forward. It's a good, solid budget. When you look at it and you say we're getting a new math program out of that, we're getting replacing Chromebooks to keep those current, we're increasing the number of flat panels. There's a lot of good educational pieces. And also in this, which the voters shouldn't forget, 3 years ago, because next year will be the 3rd year, of a teacher's contract which they supported. So those costs sometimes get forgotten, but are a major budget driver. We always think about the contract or in the contract year, when each year we're starting the year probably with around a 1 or 2% increase because of the voters' support for the teachers. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Andy. If you don't mind, we back up a little bit because I didn't want to stop you while you were
Oh,
going.
sure.
All the way back up to academics. I'm thrilled with the way that you know, you're approaching the math program and that you're making sure that the teachers are solid with it. All the way back in round one, we had this literacy decoding program that you decided, you know, for your own reasons, I'm sure we trust they're good ones, that we weren't going to go with. To my understanding, like, looking at the literacy program, or like one universal program, has kind of been put on hold for a little while. I'm assuming we'll see this come up next round. Are we looking ahead to that already? Do we have ideas of what we're going to do for a new literacy program?
Yeah, so we do have literacy committee work going on. Has been going, started last year and is continuing this year. And we are visiting Londonderry, who's doing sometime in January, who's doing 2 pilots of 2 different programs. They happen to be piloting the 2 programs we were looking at. We're putting it on hold, though, because we can't overwhelm all of our teachers with math and literacy. That's just, you know, too much at once. So we're trying to slow roll it, but make sure that we're providing the professional development along the way, so that when we do roll it out, they'll feel very comfortable and confident in the work. But we're still doing the investigating, the research, all of that.
So are we thinking that'll be next school year that this is going to start going on?
No, so next school year will be the implementation of our new math program.
So FY '26, you would start looking at literacy?
Well, we'll look at
Is
it
that what
next
you mean?
year,
Yeah.
but we won't be implementing
Right,
next year.
right.
Right, so
But we probably would be budgeting.
we'll be budgeting
Yeah.
next year,
That's
so
what
you'll
I'm
see
saying.
all
So
of
the
those
math
dollars.
will become literacy
Yeah.
Yeah.
and kind of move in that cycle.
So
So
we
we'll
budget.
have, the committee work will be done, the program will be budgeted to whichever one we select, and then we'll go from math PD to literacy. And we did a wealth of math PD at the beginning of this year, but it was, and this was feedback from staff, it felt overwhelming to try to open a building, get used to new students, and go through a new program. So we're just trying to really respect, one of my sayings, I don't want to send you to the buffet with a dessert plate. And that's how teachers can feel sometimes if it's, everything's coming at them at once. And then we're unfortunately seeing turnover. And a lot of the, I will say that the students coming out of the teaching programs are not as well versed in some of the program pieces. They're strong in technology in certain areas, but from implementation of a program, it can be a struggle. So we spent a lot of time, and I think Gina had the forethought 2 or 3 years ago. We went to a building coach across the SAU, who was a very experienced, fantastic teacher, actually from this building, who now works for us across the SAU, going into all those new teachers, offering feedback on the art of teaching, not necessarily the content area, but, you know, how to deliver it and how to manage a classroom and that. And a lot of those skills are lacking, and they really appreciated her, I think, tremendously.
I will also say that between last year and this year, while the focus really has been math, all of our teachers in this building have redone their training in phonics, just because we, you know, the later research has come out that that's so important, so we want to make sure we shored up all of our skills in that area. And so we're still doing work, you just don't see it as a specific
It's a specific
budget item.
program.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Just for Anne's sake, I want to point out that, has it been 5 years since you began a forced march on grappling with the math, the Hollis math delivery, and sort of, you know, you began an intensive study of Hollis's math delivery based on results in Brookline. Has it been that long, 5
So
years,
this is
4
actually
years?
year 7
Yeah,
of
7. Okay. It goes by so
our
fast.
math program.
Right.
And so at this point, we're finishing off,
Right.
you know, a subscription, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And maybe we
Same
will
version.
continue with the same version. Maybe we'll go in another direction. So
But
we've
the point I'm
looked at-
making is that you sort
It's
of
a cluster.
entered into a very intensive, thorough, deep, understanding study of how we deliver math, what we deliver math, what the training is, et cetera. So that seems to be coming to fruition with these decisions, and I can imagine the next thing would be to go back to literacy,
Yeah.
and we also did science for a time, et cetera.
Yep.
So.
And as soon as literacy's done, we'll go back to.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like the Golden Gate Bridge, they
Right.
never stop painting.
Right.
Exactly.
Other questions on the budget? Then let's move on to the enrollment committee.
Yes, first, I'd like to thank Ann for her willingness to jump on board and work with me to put this document together that kind of kicks off our work. So in your packet, you kind of have the objective of the committee, and then scope of work. We're going to look at space constraints, we're going to look at financial impact, we're going to look at staffing, we're going to look at recommendations. We provided you basically the original document that we worked off of. You'll see the one piece that's lined out because Ann suggested, and I agreed, that recruiting, training, and retaining qualified educators to meet the demands of the expanded student body is something that kind of is, we already do through PD, and it didn't really need to be part of this. So that will be eliminated with the board's approval. And then we went to key stakeholders, and these numbers were just what Ann and I bantered about. We are not opposed to having it somewhat larger. We don't want to have it too large, so it becomes, that it's not manageable. But if we had a teacher from each building, we're not going to say no. If the administrators want to share it or things like that, again, we're not going to say no. But it was just kind of to make sure that we felt we have representation, and the board feels we have representation of people that are impacted. So obviously, we're looking at parents and guardians, and Ann was going to touch base with PTA at their next meeting to see if there were parents interested in that. Teachers and school staff. We had originally said one member representing both buildings, but at the same time, if there was one from each building, that is fine with us. If there were two in one building and they wanted to share that and take that responsibility because they couldn't make all the meetings, again, we're looking for contributions, so we're not necessarily going to say no. School administrators, we were looking at one. We're not saying it has to be a principal, and we're not saying it only has to be one, but we definitely felt we needed at least one on there. We felt that having a local government representative, specifically from the budget committee, so that they could inform that committee, so as we're going through the process, there would be regular updates to the budget committee. So if we came back with a financial recommendation or we're going to propose a warrant, it wouldn't be the first time they were hearing about it. Community members, would like one community member. That could be somebody who is affiliated with the school. It could be somebody who just wants to serve and lives in our community. So we'll do our best to get the word out there. And then architects and engineers, they would be consulted as needed, and that's why we put the money in the budget, so that the committee would have that ability to say, well, that sounds great, but is it feasible? You know, and move forward with that.
That would be more like contracted services, basically?
Yeah.
Because you're paying for their input.
Yeah, we're paying for them to come in to address a specific item that the committee raises.
Yeah.
You know, like a simple question, could you just simply convert this back with 3 movable walls and gain 3 classes for a library? You know, because an architect might tell you the easiest thing to do is build a new library connected to the building, because it's a larger space, it's bigger walls, it's different construction for an open space than this type of environment. So we're going to try to look at, you know, all pieces, from expansion to any other pieces that are available. We are going to meet regularly to review findings, discuss progress, and collaboratively develop recommendations. And we hope to bring a kind of a committee report or something, I'd say late summer, fall, if we thought we were going to do something in next year's budget. Because we would need to start that type of warrant article. And for the school board, we're going to look at grade configurations. You know, do we have capacity at Hughes that would allow us to move the 3rd grade up there? You know, is preschool, can that be at a separate entity? You know, we're going to have a preschool coordinator, so we're already building in administrative support, so we won't have a funding piece of that. Because the other piece is trying to balance the need for what's occurring now and determining if that need is going to be a long-term need or it's going to be more of a 3 to 5 year bubble. And that's 2 different pieces for the community. So I'll take any feedback, and then once is, if there's no feedback and the board is good, then Ann and I will start to collaborate, and kind of talking about who's gonna solicit what members, and then kind of looking at a meeting schedule. If we can, we will, I think to get teachers on a committee, you need to be able to meet early afternoon. So we would probably be looking like at after school, from whatever that is, to about 4 or 5. I've always found a definite stop on a meeting attracts people. They really appreciate that we're gonna end.
So Andy, I have 3 things.
Sure.
One is, I've written so many of these now. You really need a timeline in there, even if it's approximate. I'd like
Okay.
to see some estimated timeline, whether it's end of summer 24 or whatever you want to say. It gives the public confidence that this isn't a slippery slope type of thing. And
Okay.
to your point, it also focuses on the fact that it needs to be a budget item. Number 2, if I could go back in time 10 years and fix one thing about the facilities work that I was involved with here all these years, is that Dave Ely, our architect, had been in on the very beginning. It would have, in retrospect, saved us an enormous amount of money because he understood things about construction, about just critical details, that we had so many inputs from professionals in all the different fields, and yet he knew better because he's the architect is the one who synthesizes all the engineering. So, simple things like the architect can give you industry standards for approximate costs per square foot. He knows all the school requirements for square feet per kid, for numbers of bathrooms per students, for fire, for everything. I would urge you to have the architect on board for, if not every meeting, every other meeting. It will be an indispensable long-term savings from making errors based on excellent experts who don't actually know the macroscopic view that Dave brought to us a little later than I wish we'd had him. Number 3, if you can get Mike Levitt, I don't know if he's staying on the budget committee or whatever, he is absolutely an indispensable source of wisdom, of work. He does his homework, and I cannot say enough on the record how grateful I am to him for what he's done for us as a district in his service over the years.
Yeah, he also knows the buildings from the H-step work.
Yep.
So he's got
Right.
history.
Right, and we are fortunate with the architect. He has a lot of history with our buildings because he's been on for the projects. The balancing act is, it can be difficult to have somebody on the committee that may want to bid on the project. Because
Oh,
of the-
absolutely.
Right, so that's the piece, and so we will figure out a solution to that.
Yeah.
Maybe we have an architect in the communities, yeah, and can look at that, because I wouldn't want to lose Dave, say, as the person who bids and maybe wins the bid, maybe not. But I think that's always been my concern, of trying to keep that ethical piece of making sure that the bidding process is fair and square.
I think partly what is helping you here is Section 6, because you're already saying that you're going to reach out
Right.
to subject matter experts and pay for those things. So it's a very transparent engagement of these
Yep.
experts.
Right.
We start with you, we pay for this amount of
Yep.
this information from you, and then our engagement is over.
Right.
So I just find it a lot cleaner.
Mhm.
I also think I think that lower section there where the committee shall meet regularly, it really speaks to the work product this board can expect. I think it should be like a Section 7 of work product. What is this committee producing? And to Tammy's point, when? Now, that doesn't necessarily commit you to that timeline, but I think what it does is it really helps the members of the committee to give them an idea of what they're working on and when it's expected. Now, if you need more time, you can always come back to the board and we can adjust that. So it's not
Yep.
we're not setting it in stone, but I think it helps the membership of the committee.
Yep.
The other thing is I would ask is some understanding of what the longevity of the committee is. Is it a year? Is it standing going forward? Is it 6 months? You know, what is the longevity of the charge of this committee? Because usually we like to define that to make sure there's a start and an end to the committee. So that would be my input.
Okay. With those adjustments, which I think Ann and I can easily work in, is there anything else that the board would like to see so that we can start moving forward and hopefully have something?
I neglected to say this is excellent work. I'm sorry.
Yeah, agreed.
It is excellent work. It's an
It's-
excellent charter. I love the format, superior. It's-
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I
I
think
appreciate the work.
we can definitely do the end of the committee. You know, typically, I would have something end at the warrant article, you know, and then the board
Yeah.
can always extend it, because what happens then is people vote, if the article fails or passes, you know what you're doing. And the other thing we have is we have voting, so boards change. So then a new board could look at the charter and say, based on the vote, based on our knowledge now, let's make some adjustments. So,
Right.
that's kind of where I would sit, is probably trying to start bringing information to the board fall, and then march it into the committee with the informing the committee that it's a matter of the board reaffirming their charge, which could occur in that, you know, March or April, and ask them, how many of you would continue to serve?
Yeah.
So if a teacher didn't want to serve, I could now get another teacher.
Right.
So I think that would be what I'm thinking of, and what I'll do is what I did with this one, I'll make some adjustments, and then I'll send it off to Ann. And it's very helpful because it provides me with pieces that I may not think of because I sit in it every day. So I thought it was a very good process, and I look forward to moving forward. But I think we're in a position, from what I hear from the board, if I add the timeline and the end date, I will reach out to Mike, because I don't disagree with you, Tammy. He could serve if he's staying on the budget committee, a couple purposes.
Community,
Yep.
or even
Yep.
just as a
Community, yeah.
past
community,
member
yep.
of the facilities committee.
I think I'm comfortable if we use Rob's point. I can make it very clear to any architect or anybody that we're only paying for this when it goes out to
Contracted
bid.
services,
Right,
yeah.
if you win the bid, that's fine.
Start at 0.
And then I will change the last box and add what I'll call a work product, just to clarify that, so community members would understand.
What the
because-
deliverables are.
Well, and then it's highlighted, because sometimes you get to number 6 and you'll just figure that's a footnote or something, may not read it.
Yeah.
Right.
I
The
actually,
only- I'm sorry, the only thing I would recommend is once the committee is impaneled and you have the actual members,
Yep.
to maybe your first meeting, whether it be during your organizational meeting, is to really go through this charter with the members
Okay.
and make sure they're reading it and they know precisely what their job is. Because I have seen committees where the members haven't even seen the charter and they
Yep.
don't really,
Yep.
and what that tends to do is it causes the committee to kind of float and go all in crazy directions, and
Yep.
it's like, nope, this is
Right.
let's hit this target.
And once we have a list, I'll put it in the board packet, just so that people will understand. The other piece is, obviously, if any of you know of people that are interested or are looking to get involved in the schools but don't have maybe the time commitment to become a board member, have them reach out to me.
Andy, one thing I want to point out is it says it's for K through 6. Why is it not including the pre-K faction? Because it's in the title in that first paragraph. I think, or
I'll add the
first
PK.
couple. Okay.
Good call.
Nice catch.
Very good catch. One thing I want to ask, we put on here, meet regularly. I think you and I talked about this a little bit. I'm just thinking from the perspective of a parent or as a teacher, we probably want to define what regularly means if we want people to commit. So were we gonna say monthly
Yeah.
then?
Yeah, I was gonna do monthly, and then if we get to where we're moving to some sort of recommendation, and we're running into that time crunch because of the budget
Sure.
and the articles, we'll address that with the committee, but I think, using, the rest of this month, we'll probably be able to have a committee meeting sometime in February, and be off and running. Okay, all right?
Sounds great. Nice work, guys.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Anne, for leading the charge. So the last item on our discussion, it was to discuss the critical shortage.
Yes, and I just want to run through this with the board, and then you could, if you so choose, take action tonight, or you could wait till next month, but I would appreciate action in the coming months. As we start to hit more of a critical shortage in the state of New Hampshire around teaching, the Department of Education is trying to provide, I'll say, flexibility, because the needs in the southern tier of the state are not necessarily the same as the northern tier or the seacoast. And what we're finding is my openings or needs may not be the same, so it doesn't make the list for the state's critical shortage, because I'll use the example I'm using tonight is a librarian. There aren't that many librarians across the state when you think about it, and for them to all be retiring, all be open positions, it's not that likely. So it may be a critical shortage for me, because we've had our librarians turn over in the last couple of years, whereas if I'm on the seacoast, maybe I hired my librarians 5 or 6 years ago, and they're gonna be with me a long time. So this critical shortage allows the school board, through recommendations of the superintendent, to create a critical local shortage list where we can add specific positions to that, which gives us greater flexibility in hiring. And again, I use the example of librarian, because this is a situation that occurred a few years ago, so it's still fresh in my mind. We hired an existing staff member to move from the classroom to the library. And they were in progress of getting that certification, but did not hold that certification. The state has really wanted to kind of, follow the employee, so they're looking at a number of ways to track that employee. And one is a permission to employ, so that means that you are an educator, maybe you have fulfilled all your requirements, maybe you still have something pending, but you've gone through the interview process and met with everybody, and you are the candidate that the principal and the committee would like to select. So that gives me the opportunity to employ somebody. I submit a form to the state, and it is approved. That person who's on the permission to employ, as they're working with us, they're going to get to a certain point where I'll call it the balance tips, and they're close to finishing that degree, using library media as my example. So now they're eligible for what is called a statement of eligibility. Maybe they have their student teaching to do, maybe something like that. And that statement of eligibility is the next step. But what the state, in adding this flexibility to us, we have not done a critical shortage list because we've been very fortunate, but I think in the next couple of years it's going to be very prudent. And I'm thinking where singletons like librarians, where you're only looking for one, special ed case managers immediately comes to mind, school psychologists, those pieces. And what it allows us to do, and Gina coordinates a lot of this, is to bring them in through the HR process, but have a set pathway, whether it be permission to employ, to a statement of eligibility, to a beginning educator license in that content area, to eventually a experienced educator license, because that all goes through the SAU and those functions. So by creating this critical shortage list, and I would, or Gina would need to come to you and say, we'd like to add this position to the critical shortage list, and here's why. We've been very fortunate, but school nurses, because you could have somebody coming to us who's a very experienced nurse, but doesn't have school nursing experience. And school nursing is also now licensed under the DOE, so they have both their professional license and the DOE. So this would allow us more flexibility in hiring the person of choice and then working with them as they went through the certification. It's not a lack of knowledge of nursing, or it's not a lack of knowledge of a librarian or a school psychologist. It can be, I'm going to do my practicum, or I'm going to do a piece, and I can do it as a paid employee, but the district would need to sign off on that. So that's what I'm looking at. what I would start with, because we anticipate and have one now to start our list, would be to use the library media specialist position and starting our critical shortage list with that. And then either Gina or I, through this hiring process, would come back to you and say, this is where we're really struggling to hire and need greater flexibility. I try not to make people vote the same night on things, so I don't have to have a vote tonight. But at the same time, that's what we're trying to do. And it will just, I think, allow us the greatest flexibility in what I believe is going to become a very tight labor market for educators.
And this
Is
would
this
apply
something that
to,
you can add to continually?
Yes.
With our permission, so at any
Yes.
point we can say we want to add to this, it's
Yeah.
not a
or
short window.
subtract.
Right, and
Or
subtract,
subtract.
correct. Yep.
And also, does this include situations where someone has the correct experience in licensing in a different state but isn't licensed here? So you could have somebody who's a top candidate, but doesn't have the New Hampshire documentation.
Sometimes there's reciprocity and sometimes there's not.
Right, so in cases where
yes.
there's not, you could be hiring a top professional, and I think we have somebody here in our district that you picked up a couple years ago who was in that situation.
Do you anticipate any funding impacts with this list or funding needs
No.
for this list?
No, it's more of an HR function, and it gives Gina and I greater flexibility, because the final two candidates come to us from the building, and they'll be ranked, and then we have an interview process, and we then talk to the principal again and make a selection. But I think Tammy brings up a great point. That's another example for us being so close to the border. We had some teachers from Massachusetts who live in one of our communities and wanted to get closer to home, be on the same schedule as their children. But New Hampshire can be very difficult about reciprocity. And may say to them after 15 years, you need to take this class. Or our licensing tests are not identical. And there's sometimes pushback on that. So there's another reason, just looking at the Massachusetts border, because it is, as you stay longer in your career and you start to have families and they grow, you realize being 15 minutes from your home rather than an hour, there are people willing to make that differential or change from a salary point of view, because we might pay a little less in a community in Massachusetts, but it's about a quality of life issue. So my thought was to, because it's my most recent example, and it's still a concern, is the library media specialist, and just start with that motion and start that critical shortage list. And then I think the other piece would be, we would figure out where it goes well, probably sometime in the beginning of the year, but literally just bring you the list and have a quick discussion every year about, we think we should add this because, we advertise for preschool special ed and had one applicant, so it's a concern. Because we'd have that data, how many applicants do we have? And it really is amazing. I mean, this is 7, 8 years ago, we went probably from an elementary opening having 30 to 50 candidates to being into single digits. To this year, we didn't move forward with a candidate at first grade because the teachers thought it would be better for them to just absorb the students because of the interview, because our teachers participate in that process. And that's a huge recommendation that I can't ignore when they're making that type of comment.
Andy, a few
Yeah.
years ago, we went through this problem of poor pool with the superintendent's office, so we're familiar with it.
Yep, yeah, and we're back. I mean, that's another one where they're looking for flexibility. I mean, there are 11 superintendent openings as of today in New Hampshire. Yeah. Yeah.
So when you add something to the critical list, is there a waiting period before you can activate a position, like a person?
No, what it does is it authorizes Gina and I to move forward.
Okay.
Now, I'll be honest,
Sorry, I didn't know what the terminology was, but I
Yep.
wasn't sure if you had to have said it for a month before you can.
right, I can always do a permission to employ. It just, when I do that, it restricts the avenues for the individual as they try to work with the state. So let's say I said to you, you said to me you wanted to become a computer teacher, and you have all the skill sets. So I do the permission to employ, you start. After 5 months, you have taken 4 or 5 courses, and now you'd like to get your statement of eligibility from the state. if we don't have the critical shortage list, they're going to delay that until I put you on the critical shortage list. And
So
we
are
may-
you looking for a motion tonight?
Would I like a motion tonight? If you're comfortable with it, yes.
Well, I would
Okay.
like to ask the chair to put a motion on the deliberations for this.
I can
Is
give
that
you,
an appropriate
Sure.
next thing to say?
yeah, I can give you an example of one, because we'll be heading into deliberations, to accept the superintendent's recommendation to declare the position of library media specialist be added to the local critical shortage list. So what we're doing is we're establishing the list with the position that we had difficulty hiring in. And then from here, we would come back to you to add to that list. But it just, basically what you're doing with that motion is establishing the list. We're identifying just one need, but I'm pretty sure as we head out to hiring, we may look at what we have for openings, you know, and then decide how the market's going. Because both Gina and I attend a variety of meetings with our colleagues, and we kind of can get a sense of like, if everybody's looking for the same position, you know, and especially, you really see it a lot, high school chemistry.
Yeah.
You know, and you'll hear everybody around the table, and we're all looking for high school chemistry, you know? It's
I know a
They
great
become
high school
assistants.
chemistry
Yeah,
teacher.
yeah. Well, we have two tremendous administrators who are high, yeah. But
So
they're
by
both
putting
doing a
the
great job in
motion
their
under
positions.
deliberations, we're not offering you the list where we just put it that way so we can discuss it and vote on it. It may be voted down.
Correct,
Right.
right.
I just
You know,
wanted
and
to make
I'm
that
just saying
point.
that type of motion would add that specific position, but it also establishes the list, knowing that the board, we have to bring it to you to be put on the list, and we would recommend when to take something off the list.
Another
And so
question,
is there a
is this
list per
RSA
district?
driven?
Well, this is relatively new. It used to be the state-provided critical shortage list.
Right.
But the problem was with the dynamics and the
Right.
differences in the state, it just wasn't working well. I'm like, why isn't this on the critical shortage list? I can't find anybody, you know? But, you know, the Seacoast didn't have a problem, the North Country didn't have a problem, you know? And again, it's really, school psychs is a good example. You know, nursing is a good example, library.
So decentralizes it.
But that's what I'm saying, I guess, is there a single one for the SAU and you're adding per, it's per
No.
district as
No,
your?
it's by district.
That's what I was
Yep.
asking, sorry to
yeah,
clarify, that's okay.
yeah.
And is this a change in regulation or a change in RSA?
Change in procedure.
Procedure
Yeah.
even, okay.
Yeah, so it just used to be this, if the position existed on the state list, and then there were complaints about the state list
Right,
not
right,
being complete,
right.
so they recently said, but the board can authorize a local
So it's not a new
critical
law
shortage.
so much as a change in how the regulations implement within the DOE. Okay.
Right, and part of the problem would be that some superintendents, especially with a lot of turnover, weren't completing the survey. So if you only got 50% of superintendents saying what their critical needs are, it was not necessarily a totally accurate list. So this way, we're saying, no, this is what I need in Hollis, or this is what I need in Brookline, and this is what I need in the co-op, which might be totally different critical shortage lists based on needs.
Got
And
it.
this is considered public record, community members can see what the critical list is and
Oh, yeah.
where our critical needs are.
Yeah.
Just so I'm clear, that just the establishment of this list also gives you the tools to have more latitude in your hiring practices and maybe a quicker timeline, quicker reaction time and things like that.
Right.
Well,
Go ahead.
I was just saying, in addition, so we can always do permission to employ, but then we're done after a year. This provides us an opportunity with a statement of eligibility to provide a site-based licensing plan so that we can engage in a long-term relationship and really develop a teacher, which is to everyone's advantage, rather than, thanks for filling the hole this year.
So
We'll
this
have-
So
gives
does
the
this list
potential
from a
employee
main-
confidence that they have a long-term path.
Correct.
That isn't, okay.
So from a maintenance perspective of the list, is it an annual thing where it's reviewed and updated, or is it a living document where we can perpetually change
Yeah,
it?
it's perpetual, but I think my thought is to put it somewhere in the August to the beginning of school year timeframe at a board meeting, so that, to have that discussion if we're adding something or taking something away. And again, look at it through that lens of that long-term path. So if I'm that third grade teacher in Massachusetts, and I'm selected as the best candidate, You're sitting with your superintendent's meeting or the assistant superintendent's meeting, and we're a little concerned about the certification because of a different test or something like that. That candidate is more likely to be like, I can't be unemployed in a year, you know? So they may say to us, thank you very much, but I'm gonna keep my job security, I have continuing contract, I'm not willing to take that risk. To Gina's point, now we say, okay, you're gonna come in to a permission to employ, all right? But that permission to employ becomes a statement of eligibility. You basically just said to them, you have 4 years, 3 years, to get this done. And it's usually, I need to take a course or pass a test, because they're not, as much as we have reciprocity, it's not like I just send my certificate over there and they say, thank you very much. Now, some states are good, New Hampshire is not one of them.
Especially if
I think-
somebody's changing specialties.
That's another point. So if
That's
I
the
was
point.
going to, like, we had a classroom teacher in one of our Hollis buildings, went from a classroom teacher to a special ed teacher, knowing they needed a couple pieces of coursework to complete it. But we knew, based on their performance with all the special ed children they had had in their classroom, they were going to be fantastic. So that, to me, is another example where if that position's on our critical shortage list, it provides that teacher greater security. You know, because we don't want to have to go after a year, she bumps back into the classroom, and we've invested time, energy, and money into somebody, or we have somebody who's fantastic, and now we don't have a position for that person.
It might serve to attract people as well, because if I'm somebody in another state or another district, and I happen to be the librarian, and I happen to see, oh, Hollis is on my short list, and oh, look at that, they have, that position is on their critical list. That could be more of an attraction to me to make the move, because,
Right.
you know, so I like the transparency of it.
Also, except for summer, we are here to hear your nominations
Right.
and ask the tough questions,
Right.
and to follow through 6 months later or a year later. Did this person meet all of the, you know, is the path working?
Right.
So there's a school board oversight of your hiring, your nominations, which adds another public factor, public.
And that there's a
security.
timeline associated, right?
Right.
That
Yep.
it's, there's going to be a
Yep.
date certain where that certification is expected to
Right.
be attained.
Mhm.
Maybe Andy, think about, you might think about identifying for the board when you're going to make a hire that requires board approval. I know that many positions don't require board approval, but for the ones that do, make sure that you identify that they're from this kind of resource, so that then we have the responsibility of tracking it with you, so you're not,
Yep.
you know, it's not invisible to the public.
I think that's an easy piece, because we usually bring the name, the salary, the degree level. We can talk about it if they're on an alternative pathway.
Right.
And why. Yeah.
And as you have done with others in the past, this is just a new system, but,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay.
All right, so with that, let's move right into deliberations. And why don't we start with this critical shortage deliberation, since we just have been spending time discussing it.
So I move we accept the superintendent's recommendation of adding the library media specialist to our local critical shortage list.
Second.
Further discussion? Okay. We've just discussed it at length.
Formalities are important, that the record has to
Okay.
show.
Yep.
Okay, all in favor of establishing the critical shortage list? Okay, 500, motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that takes us to the remainder of our deliberations, which are all policy-based. So Anne, I will turn it over to you. And Gina.
Have the outline?
Do you need me to make the motion?
Do you want the
Go
outline?
for the motion. Third and adopt.
No, she's got it.
There it is.
She's got it. She
That's
needs to.
probably the best way to do it. Just get an emotion on the floor, and
Here.
then we can talk about it.
Yep, Anne's got it.
Sorry, we've been
Take your
talking
time.
for a long
Take your
time.
time. Yeah, Take your time. Take your time. You've done amazing.
Okay, so I move to accept, this is not, wait, it says the first reading of EHAB. Sorry. this
Keep
should
going,
be
those are the
third.
notes from the
Oh,
previous.
I'm sorry, there's no
It's at the
notes.
bottom of it.
To accept the third reading of policy EHAB, data governance and security.
To accept the third reading and adopt.
And adopt policy EHAB, data governance and security.
Second.
Okay, discussion.
There have been no changes since our second reading. There were no objections at our last meeting to it, so, I suggest we go ahead and accept it.
Okay. Questions? All right, all in favor of adopting EHAB?
Thank you.
500, motion passes. Moving on to EHB.
Okay, so, I move to accept the third reading and adopt policy EHB, data and records retention.
Second.
Discussion?
So what is all this pink stuff? Sorry, pink stuff, that was really helpful. Item E on our documentation has a bunch of highlights, and I wasn't sure what we were supposed to understand
Let me
from
go
that.
look at that.
Maybe I didn't use the technology properly. It could be it just showed up on the,
Oh, you know what? Those are probably like spelling error highlights.
The little
That's how
underlines.
it's popping up for me.
Is it the comment,
Is it in the same? Yeah. from the-
Tammy, that you're asking
I don't know,
about?
yeah, I guess they are comments, yeah.
Yeah, so I think well, I'm not gonna say.
So they were comments.
Oh, it looks like comments from our policy discussion were
Okay.
somehow transferred into there.
Okay, so they're
Was-
not,
It's currently posted?
yes.
That's funny because I
I'm
just
seeing a
opened
different
it up
version.
from there and I
This is
don't
the one
see
in the
that.
packet, though.
Yeah, so we fixed that. I believe you reached out to Emmy today.
No, that was for GC,
Okay.
not this one.
If you go to the outline version of the agenda on board docs, it doesn't have.
Yeah, except on the board docs one
doctor
doesn't
one.
have it. Where did that one come
Board
from?
docs.
Board docs.
Yeah.
Because
Okay,
this is from
because
board
I just pulled it
docs.
up from Board Docs
You
as
had
well.
this
Huh.
happen last time, sometimes
That's
there's a
interesting.
Depending when you pull, like,
Yeah, when you
when you look at it.
Anyway,
it
as
may
long
have
as
been
there,
updated.
as
Yeah.
long as the material, and I'm showing it to Ann now, that I see
Yeah.
highlighted in pink is fine.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
just wanted
Yeah.
to understand if I was supposed to,
No, I would wonder about that too if I were.
okay.
That's weird.
We'll look at board docs again from an administrative point of view,
Please.
because like I have it on mine, my printed copy, and Gina's does not have it on the online copy.
Right, I think it's a timing of
Yeah.
like when, so maybe if there's a way to send out an alert if something's been changed or added, I
So
don't know.
this wasn't the change,
I just
actually.
opened it now.
No, this is unrelated to what I wrote to Emmy about.
Today
Yeah.
was GBCD, so EHB hasn't been changed. So I think it might be because it's uploaded as a Word doc as opposed to a PDF.
I
So
think
I think
that's
it,
probably
on my
it.
Word, if I have, if I can see the comments, then the comments will show up.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so we'll
sure
do
it's a
PDF.
PDFs from now on.
Yes.
Yep,
Okay.
good solution,
Yep.
okay. Okay, all in favor of, okay,
Thanks.
500, excellent, motion passes. Okay,
Okay.
moving right along.
Great. Okay, so now we are at
ACN.
ACN. Okay,
Yep.
so I move to accept the first reading of policy ACN, nursing mothers accommodations.
Second.
Discussion.
I think this is exceptional. I'm very thrilled to see it.
So this essentially puts us in compliance with a couple new laws, the Nursing Mothers Pump Act, and I think it's HB 358. Is that what it is? I had the policy update here. I have too many
Well,
windows
there's
open right
RSA
now.
275. So this is the reason why you don't see any underlines is it's a brand new policy for
Yes.
us.
Right.
And it puts us in compliance. We've always been in compliance with the laws and the regulations, but the change to the law requires that we also hold a policy. So this is the policy with some slight edits. This is the same language that we've adopted in our other two districts.
Very good.
Okay, it is HB 358.
358,
Yep.
Questions? All right, I'm gonna put it to a vote. All in favor?
Thank you.
500, motion passes.
All right, and so our next one.
GBCD.
Okay, I move to accept the first reading of GBCD, background investigation and criminal records check.
Second. Sorry.
suspension.
Okay, so this is the one where if you pulled this up earlier today, you did not have the right document. So the document that you're looking at should be much longer than the one earlier today. There should be a lot of underlining.
The 9-page document.
Yeah, it should be quite a beast. So essentially, this is a policy that you actually approved in October of 2022, and according to the oracle of NHSBA, this apparently happens frequently. So this is, I'm going to recommend we go with all of their recommendations. So you're going to see at the very beginning there are a lot of definitions that were not in the first, our previous policy, or our current policy rather. The only ones that were in before were, I believe it was covered person and applicant, and there's been quite an addition now. And then as you go through, you'll see where, you know, obviously some of the language has just been cut completely. We've added more. I've tried to leave what was already in our policy, but this is kind of a mess to read the way it is right now. So I do recommend that we just kind of go with it, and then we can talk about it more. But if you want some specifics, I'm going to pull up the policy update, and I can tell you a little bit more about it. Just because it's in the holidays. So there's SB 39, which made some change in making the state responsible for criminal record checks, and SB 136, prohibiting employment or appointment of volunteers or educators whose credentials have been revoked and are under current suspension. And you can see those. There are also changes relative to bus monitors in D2 and in some of the footnotes. And then in section B, the only, the buses are in section B, and the only other significant changes in section D5, with some language allowing the superintendent to share information about a criminal record for misdemeanor hires with the board.
So I have a question about this, and that is, this is a policy which did not appear in its proper format, through no fault of anyone, in time for us to really read, each of us to take it in its fullness. This is January. Our next meeting is typically brief before, and maybe even after, a joint meeting with the Budget Committee in February. And typically the next meeting is the district meeting in March, after elections, and we know that the elections will make some changes here. So I'm wondering if it's appropriate to have a first reading of such an octopus. If you guys think it is, it's fine, but I'm just pointing out the timing.
Are you recommending that we waive
I
second
don't
and
even have a
third?
recommendation. It
Okay.
just feels awkward to me that something that didn't appear in the packet in full form before the meeting, and I'm not being critical at all, it's just that there's a lot here, definitions, et cetera.
Oh, you're saying don't.
Maybe we should table this.
I see what you're saying.
So the
I'm
first
just
Don't
wondering-
even
I'm just
approve
wondering
the
how-
first reading. Okay. Well, that's funny because I did not get this copy of this policy, so
Right.
I was actually going to abstain from voting, just because I haven't read it. So maybe we do.
I think we
Will
should, I
that
would like
cause
to move.
issues if we table it?
Do you need a
Nope.
motion to table it?
You
Yeah,
do.
I would do-
You
yeah.
I would
withdraw
like,
the
I'd
motion.
like to move to
wait,
table.
Well,
We've
we gotta
to
withdraw
withdraw
hers first.
Ann's motion.
Okay, so I withdraw
Well, if she
my
would-
motion to accept the first
Okay.
reading.
And I withdraw my second.
So do we need a motion to table?
Yeah.
It's not a motion, it's not on the floor anymore,
Or you
withdrew
could just
it.
not take action. But
You could not take action, but if you table it, it will alert us to make sure we bring it back.
So I'd like to move to table discussion and deliberations on policy GBCD
Do you want to
Do
put a
it
time
until
frame on it?
the
10th.
April, and have the first reading be April of 2024.
Second.
all right, is there a discussion on that?
Is there any urgency to having this updated?
We're always going to follow the law,
Right.
so we're fine.
Right, yeah, I mean, our procedures, this is not a problem at all.
Okay. Okay, all in favor then of tabling policy GBCD until the April meeting?
Thank you.
5-0.
And sorry about that.
Thank you.
It's no problem,
No
really.
problem at all. Okay,
Okay, we are now.
JCA.
JCA. All right, and so I move to accept the first reading of policy JCA, change of school or assignment, best interests and manifest hardship.
Second.
discussion?
Okay, so, once again, this puts us in compliance. This is another one that's required by law. There are very few revisions if you kind of look through with me. I hope everybody's had an opportunity to read it. So,
So this was an existing policy that we're just updating for.
we're just
right,
updating
based on the
according to,
SBA.
you'll see section 7(8) and section A.
There were changes to the law regarding not the manifest hardship, but the best interest reassignment, specifically who determines if tuition will be paid. And so the best interest is determined by the superintendent, and then the tuition goes before the board if the superintendent makes the recommendation that the district covers the tuition. So it's just kind of putting those into the policy. Because we just saw this December 7th, 2022. But we'll bring it back again.
Okay, any other questions on JCA?
I just have one question. They have in section 2B, Roman numeral 2, or not, it's I's, sorry, 2 I's. The students transfer to another public school or public academy within the district of residence. That language, I'm thinking about this. What qualifies as a public academy? The only ones I can think of are like Pembroke and Pinkerton being the public schools for their towns. Is that?
Oh, also Academy of Science and Design, so that's a charter school, it's a public school, it's called
So
Academy.
public charter
Well, that's
school.
why I'm asking, is
Yeah.
this something that extends then
Yeah.
in that, is that covering those as well?
Yes, and then the language also would allow us, because right now, if you think about Hollis and what schools are within the district of residence, we don't have a lot of options. But who knows if a charter school will open in the
Okay.
town? And this allows us to make sure that we're in compliance with
And so
our
they,
options.
so charter schools fall under the terminology public academy then?
If they're public charter schools.
They're public charter.
Yep.
Okay.
There's also private charter schools.
Yeah.
Well, correct.
No, no,
I'm
I'm just
asking 'cause
saying,
they're
I'm-
using the
I'm
word
sorry.
academy.
I'm expressing anger at a lot of things that have nothing to do with you.
Thank you for clarifying that, 'cause I
Sorry.
was starting to feel
Sorry.
tickled. No, you're totally fine. It's the word academy that was kind of throwing me off, because I haven't really seen that in other policies before called out, knowing that there's the Academy of Science and Design, but then there are public schools called academies. But if they're using that terminology to include charter schools,
Captain Samuel Douglas Academy.
oh, technically CSD. That's right.
Yeah, because even
Touche,
charter
Gina.
schools for the most part they're public schools. I don't know what that's a good question. The distinction of academy. I mean, people just put that in their
I
titles,
think it's just
in their
because of
name
the
all the
name,
time.
yeah.
It doesn't actually change what the institution is.
So I wonder if that's,
If it's necessary.
if it's
Or if it's
necessary,
legally
applicable,
problematic.
if it's legally
We can
problematic.
look into that.
Okay.
And also, actually, what about
Or limiting.
schools that are funded by vouchers? Do they get labeled public?
It shouldn't be.
Sorry,
you
I'm
look at-
starting to wind up here. You guys will be glad when
We're
April
spinning
comes.
into the rabbit hole.
Yes,
here.
okay.
So first reading.
Right.
We'll get some more
I was
information.
gonna say, yep, we're gonna,
That's a question.
policy
Give me
committee's
a
gonna take up that
second, I'm just
language.
gonna make
And we are, I will take the vote on the first read of JCA. 500, motion passes. Okay, moving on to JKAA.
Okay, so
Where was I?
once again, so I'm going to move to accept the first reading of policy JKAA, use of physical restraints and seclusion. And Gina, since
Second.
this was yours,
Yes. You don't want to take
I'm
this
going to
one?
let you go for this. Sorry, Carol, thank you.
This is a very lengthy policy, and
A very what?
Lengthy policy.
Lengthy, I thought.
And so
I don't know what I thought I heard you
Yeah.
say.
there were quite a few changes to the laws over this past year, and so this brings us in compliance. There
It
was
looks pretty much
so what
totally replaced.
Yeah.
well
Not
that was
exactly.
that was an end decision of the policy committee because we started to go piece by piece, but they were so different. And then transportation used to be one section, but then it's multiple sections. So it ended up being more readable
Right.
to say this is what we had and this is what we're going to, because it became a little convoluted.
Gotcha.
But it is a first read. This puts us in compliance. Once it's, cleared out a little bit, then it'll be easier to really dig into the specifics over 3 reads, which will bring us into like May or June.
Possibly what we should have done with the other policy, GPCD, but.
So I have a
Sometimes
question
you just
about
gotta
this
knock it down
because
and
of
start
the
from
word,
scratch.
the use of the word child throughout, the language of it. So I'm concerned, I know that J is students, but the public may not recognize J as students, even though it says so on the policy manual. It took me a long time to remember that when I go through looking at different things or searching. If you search on the policy manual for a word, you are going to jump into a policy that could be about staff, could be about employees. Sometimes there are policies that treat similar subjects, but the content is somewhat different for the adults who are in your employ versus the students who attend your schools. So I would like to see the word student and/or children in the title to ensure that whoever is reading it is quite clear this is not about adults. And then way further down on the same point, once we get into the bulk of it, right? So you've lined out everything, and now you're starting with uppercase letter A, policy statement. This policy is designed to help. That's the first time I'm seeing, words that we're supposed to adopt. So the word child appears in almost every single section multiple times, and so I've been curious if it should say child or student. I don't know. I don't have an opinion.
Why wouldn't they all just be student?
That's
It's
what
more
I'm saying.
clear,
I think student.
it's more
because-
precise.
Student?
Yeah,
Well,
I feel
'cause the
student is better.
Student is
Correct.
part of the district, and they were attending
No, I
school
agree
here,
with you.
where
I was
child
clarifying
is
which thing you
like
were saying.
any child.
So item D, under B, so B, there's section A, section B, number 1, under that's lowercase letters, D for David. There's a sentence that says, it's in the 3rd line, child in a prone position. For the purpose of this definition, physical restraint that involves the temporary controlling of an individual. I think it should still say individual student. Because again, these policies are big, and many people who want to read them have no experience with the format of the policy manual, and it took me a long time of serving on this board to just keep clear in my head that this is about kids, this, enrolled students, this is about outsiders, third parties, this is about employees, and I think the more clarity we can add, the better. And then I had one more, and then I'll stop. So that was D. Now lowercase letter E, Roman numeral V, 5. No, numeral V, sorry, 5. So in the second line, the use of force by a person to defend himself or herself or a third person from what the actor reasonably believes to be the imminent use of unlawful force by a child. I think, again, that needs to be student. Anywhere there's the word child, I think
we
it should
should
be
do that.
student. The other question I have about this, because I'm very gun-shy about unintended consequences of not being specific enough. Although there's also unintended consequences of being too specific, I'm aware of that. When I see a statement like that, I immediately ask myself, which is just how my head works, what if it's a non-enrolled student? Should these all say enrolled student, as opposed to, say, a sibling who is in the building because of they're attending with an adult or because they're at an event? We sometimes have like the haunted house, et cetera, that allow. Do we need to clarify that? Do we need to include some section about that? I just, and the last thing, I apologize, I had one more question, and that is uppercase letter C, section C, training required. I just have a very general question about this because we haven't visited this restraint policy as far as I can remember since we had acquired our own school resource officer for our own district, unshared with the co-op. So under training required, there's a bunch of stuff about who gets trained, how they're trained, who's authorized to take these kinds of actions, and my question is, does that include the school resource officer?
As someone who gets trained?
Gets trained, is trained, would be qualified, would be authorized. I mean, if you're talking about someone needing restraint, very often there's violence involved, so say a child having let's call it a tantrum, just to be very, very simplistic and not label kids as bad or anything. Sometimes a school resource, and we've seen school resource officers more often implicated in questions of their actions with high school students across the country, in big news articles. But at the elementary level, it has happened. And I'm just curious how the school, because we haven't in the past that I remember, within the context of having this kind of policy in place. I think of the people sitting here, I think I'm the first person that had to deal with a restraint policy, maybe Rob too, but I don't remember. I knew I had to deal with it when I was you and you. We didn't have our own SRO, and I'm not sure that we ever even asked the question if the school resource officer is called to the building to deal with this kind of thing.
So the
I just
resource
like to
officer would
understand
never
it
be
faster.
called to a building to deal with this type of thing. We do have teams that are specifically, and number 1, number 2, number 3, and there's always the secondary person. However, that doesn't mean that there wouldn't be a situation that would come up in the presence of, and then what? So I will get some answers.
Could you, thank you.
Absolutely.
Can you clarify, what is the role of a school resource officer? I haven't heard this term before.
So we actually have a community resource officer in Hollis. The co-op has a school resource officer, and so this is a resource to the community. So the officer does quite a few things, talks about, does some lessons in classes, teaches DARE in grade 6.
Oh, do you mean like police officers?
Yes.
Oh, when you say officer, I thought it was like a
Officer Cush.
title. Officer, yes,
Yeah.
of course, okay.
I was
So-
like, what do you mean you don't know?
I was waiting.
Well, when
was
you
like,
say
all right,
it,
Ann,
there's
we'll get there
so
later.
much, there's so much like terminology, like, okay.
Code for.
I didn't realize I was like
SRO,
police
school
officer.
Yeah.
Okay, got
Okay.
you. All right,
That's okay.
thank you.
So Gina, it interests
That's an
me.
important thing we
Well,
want
we-
cleared up.
It interests me that you say a school resource officer is not automatically a part of dealing with the kinds of conditions this is intended to address.
Well, is it because he's considered a community resource officer versus
No.
school?
No,
It's
'cause
just
it's-
title.
We have
okay.
we have our special ed administrator, we have our principal, we have our curriculum administrator, we have school counselor, we have school psych. Those are typically your first folks to respond. Sometimes it's the classroom teacher if we're talking about maybe pre-K or the intensive needs pre-K. So there's just individuals who work with students who might need this special type of training. We make sure that those folks are paraprofessionals that work with them that are trained first, and then there's a response protocol and a call is made so everybody's aware that there's a need for assistance with the behavior.
I think in this policy, if we clarify, even if it's just a clause or a sentence, that this is not intended to address criminal type of activity or the types of distinctions that a police officer would be called
Well-
upon to deal with.
Even the school resource officer, community resource officer is really invited to get involved. He or she is not going to get involved unless it's A, like something that's so egregious.
Right, sure.
Or B, they're invited. So they
I understand.
typically.
I just feel like
yeah.
a sentence or two, again,
Yeah, and we can absolutely do that. I don't want you to think that they,
automatically step
Right.
in, right.
most
So-
times, they're gonna make administrators aware and wait to see if they're going to be invited to do something, or they're gonna be told, we got it, it's okay.
So, isn't there a policy for our resource officer that we could just point to that defines the kinds of things that
Yeah,
he's
there's a-
involved
there's-
in? Would
well,
that just be
there's a
easier than
rem-
adding a clause?
Well, you could reference the memorandum of understanding. Now, that's
That's
right.
maybe what I'm thinking of. Okay.
That's updated each year between the superintendent and the police chief.
And are
They
we in
kind of
our
just
third
have-
year with this? Are we gonna start seeing budget items? Have I lost
Um,
track?
I will have to follow up with Joe, because there were
3 years.
other possibilities of,
Okay.
grants.
All right. I just feel that, again, first impressions are lasting. I recall trying to read policies when I was a parent, trying to understand what the school board was talking about. And, it's very intimidating, even though it is plain English, it's very intimidating, and you really don't know the jargon, the lingo, or what does that mean. So I feel like if we could just add some kind of clarification to this, that would allow the reader, a lay reader, to understand what Andy and Gina were trying to explain.
Okay. Great. Any other comments on this policy? Okay. All in favor of accepting the first read? Thank you. Thank you for stepping in. 500, motion passes. Okay, at this point, I will take a motion to enter non-public, please.
I move that the board by roll call go into non-public session pursuant to RSA 91-A:3, Section 2A, the dismissal, promotion, or compensation of any public employee, and C, to discuss a matter which, if discussed in public, would likely affect adversely the reputation of a person other than a member of the body or agency itself.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, and roll call, Tammy?
Tammy, aye.
And I.
Rob, aye.
Carol Roy, aye.
Amy, aye.
We're going to use that conference room all the way down to the right.
And we will not be conducting any business after non-public, correct?
We will adjourn
Just
from
adjourn.
public.
I just have to say that.